Hi, welcome to this Blender video tutorial entitled Scaling Objects. To demonstrate Blender's object scaling methods, I've placed a primitive UV sphere object in my Blender scene. I've also opened the right 3D Editor control panel and control up arrowed into full screen. Objects in Blender are scaled about a pivot point. The default pivot point is the object's bounding box center point. It is possible to change the pivot point by clicking on the pivot point icon in the 3D Editor viewport header and select other pivot points. These pivot points are described in a different video tutorial entitled Pivot Points, so for this demonstration we will use the default Object Center pivot point. A common method for scaling objects in Blender is to select the object and press the S key. The S key in Blender is the Scale key. Here I will select the UV sphere object and press the S key and drag my cursor to scale the UV sphere object. Notice the X, Y, and Z scale readings in the right control panel. The S key by default, in all views, scales the object from its center point in all three X, Y, and Z directions. I will left-click to set the scale. I will set the sphere's scale back to x, y, z equals 1 by typing in the value of 1 in the Scale Control panel X, Y, and Z controls. Blender allows users to scale along a specific axis by pressing the S key followed by the X key or the Y key or the Z key. Here, with the UV sphere object still selected, I will press the S key followed by the X key and scale the sphere along the X-axis direction. I will left-click to set the scale. You could do the same thing by using the Scale button in the left 3D Editor control panel. Here, with the sphere object already selected, I will press the Scale button in the left control panel and then press the Y key and scale the sphere around the object's Y-axis direction. I will left-click to set the scale. You can also scale an object in Blender by clicking on the control arrows in the right Scale control panel. Here, each time I click on the control arrow to the right of the Z-axis, the object scales about its Z-axis direction by 0.1 unit. I can reset the scale of the UV sphere object to 1 for X, Y, and Z by either typing in 1 in the X, Y, and Z scale controls, or I can press Alt-S, which will clear all scaling of a selected object. Here I will press Alt-S. Notice the sphere's scale has returned to its original state. I will deselect the UV sphere object and numpad 7 into top view. In top orthographic view, I will select the UV sphere object and press the S key. Notice that the object is freely scaled in response to my mouse movement. I can control this a bit by holding down my Control key. This causes the object to jump in scale by 0.1 unit with each jump as I move my cursor. I can gain even finer control of the object's scale by holding down the Shift key instead of the Control key. Notice the object's scaling is quite slow in comparison to my mouse movement. Instead of holding down the Control or the Shift key while scaling, I can gain some scale control by simply clicking the up and down arrows on my keyboard, which scale the object 0.1 unit with each click. I will left-click to set the scale. I'll press Alt-S and return the scale to X, Y, and Z equals 1, and numpad 1 into front orthographic view. Another method to scale an object is to use the Scale Manipulator widget. By default, when an object is selected, a Translate manipulator is located at the object's center. It is this icon here with red, blue, or green arrows. I can change the manipulator from the Translate widget to the Scale widget by clicking on the Scale widget icon located in the 3D Editor viewport header. Notice that the Scale widget looks much like the Translate widget, but instead of arrow points, the Scale widget terminates in small boxes. The red and blue boxes here in front orthographic view correspond to the red X and blue Z axis as indicated by the mini-axis indicator in the bottom left of the 3D viewport. This means that I can, in front orthographic view, use the Scale widget to scale the object along either the X or the Y axis directions. Here I will click on the red X box in the Scale widget and scale the object along the X axis. The scaling is accomplished by moving my cursor with the left mouse button depressed. Simply letting go of the left mouse button sets the scale. Here I will click on the blue Z box of the Scale widget and scale the UV sphere along its Z axis. While scaling with the Scale widget, I can still hold down my Control button to control the scaling, or hold down the Shift button for even finer control. Letting go of the left mouse button sets the scale. The Scale widget works in all views, and the availability of the widget's axis lines will depend upon which view you're in. I will numpad 3 into right side view. Notice here that I have the green Y-axis and the blue Z-axis as possible object scale axes. I will rotate my display into a user orthographic view. Here in this user orthographic view, I can select the red X-axis scale, or the blue Z-axis scale, or the green Y-axis scale. You can return to the Translate Manipulator widget by clicking on the Translate widget icon in the 3D viewport header.